Tonight's story is slow. It's quiet. It's meant to unravel gently, without urgency, without noise. For the next 2 hours, you'll drift through the ancient story of Orpheus and Eurydice, a myth not of triumph, but of longing, of music, and of silence. There are no gods shouting in this one, no monsters leaping from shadows, just the low hum of grief and the way it echoes. It's a story told like a song, one note folding into the next, building not to a crescendo, but to a hush, something steady, something soft enough to sleep in. And if you'd like, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting, knowing who else is falling asleep alongside you, scattered across the world, sharing this slow walk back into the myths. So settle in. The fire's already burning. The night is long, but calm, and the world you're about to enter is older than memory. Before grief had shaped him, Orpheus was the sound of the world remembering itself. He was not born in a palace, nor raised among the marble halls of kings. His cradle was a hillside, his lullabies the hush of wind through reeds. The stories say he was the son of Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, and some whisper that Apollo himself was his father. But whoever cast the thread of his life, it was the lyre that cradled his soul. He played before he spoke, and when he did speak, it was said that birds forgot their flight to listen, that rivers stilled their currents, that even wild beasts closed their eyes to rest in the music. He did not ask for adoration. His melodies came like breath. They weren't meant to dazzle, but to remember, something older than song, older even than language. He wandered not as a performer, but as one who simply brought sound where silence waited too long. His lyre hung always across his back, its strings worn, but never tired. Children would follow him barefoot through olive groves, drawn not by words, but by how he made the wind feel less lonely. Women pressed their palms to stone walls when he passed, hoping to catch some echo. Men who had returned broken from wars found themselves weeping gently to his melodies, not from sorrow, but from the relief of being able to feel again. In the deep hours of the night, when even the stars seemed to hold their breath, Orpheus would sit by the river's edge and play, not for anyone, not even for himself, but for the hush that waited in all things. It said that his music was so pure that even the gods grew still when it touched the air. Apollo gave him a lyre of golden string. Dionysus, wild-hearted and loud, offered him wine, but took it back with a grin when Orpheus refused. He had no need for intoxication. The song was already within him, and it made the world gentler in its unfolding. But even the most perfect melody seeks a place to rest. And for Orpheus, that place had not yet revealed itself. He walked alone, though he lacked nothing. Yet in the way he paused beside flowering trees, or the way he lingered a moment longer when passing voices laughed together, the world knew. He was waiting for something he did not know how to name. And then, without thunder, without omen, he met her. Eurydice. Some say she was a dryad, a daughter of the trees. Others say she was a mortal girl with no divine blood, only quiet in her eyes and earth beneath her fingernails. The stories disagree on the details, as stories do. But they all agree on this. The moment Orpheus saw her, the music changed. It did not become grander. It did not rise in volume. It simply deepened, like a river that had found its true bed. She listened not with admiration, but with understanding. She did not praise him. She did not need to. Her presence was not applause. It was echo, the kind of silence that made the song feel whole. Orpheus stopped walking. For the first time, he set his lyre down. They sat beside one another without speech. Her smile was not wide, but when it came, the wind leaned into it. And he, who had wandered all his life, found himself still. No oaths were sworn, no divine blessings were sought. They loved as trees grow, without hurry, without announcement. Just there, and then more there, and then unshakable. And for a time, it was enough. The world held them in gentle balance. His music softened into something even quieter, a kind of remembering, not of sorrow, but of stillness. But the gods, though quiet, are never absent, and the fates, even when not seen, keep weaving. He met her in a place without audience, no stage, no throne, no polished colonnade or chorus of names announcing lineage. Just an open hill, light dappled and green, where the trees bent slightly as though remembering a song from long ago. She was walking among them barefoot, her hands trailing against the bark, her eyes not searching for anything, simply watching what passed. He had come to sit in the shade and play, not for attention, but for quiet. And yet, when she paused near him, the sound changed. Eurydice, a name that arrived not with thunder, but with stillness. She did not ask who he was. He did not ask where she came from. There was no need. When their eyes met, the breath between them became the only language necessary. Orpheus lowered the lyre to his lap. She sat nearby, close enough to feel the soundless vibration of the strings that still quivered faintly from his last chord. There was no courting in the way others would expect. No garlands, no declarations. Their bond unfolded like the edge of dawn, slow, certain, inevitable. When she returned the next day, and the day after that, they did not speak of love. They moved through the fields together, and the silence between them became a third presence, steady, undemanding. He played when she asked him not to, soft melodies, ones that seemed to rise from the ground beneath her feet. She listened with the kind of stillness that made each note fall more clearly into the world. When she smiled, it was not for him. It was with him, as though the music had shaped itself into joy. Time passed, but neither of them marked it. The seasons changed, and still they walked. The flowers changed color. The rivers grew thicker with spring. He composed no new epics. His fingers preferred simplicity now, songs without stories, songs that echoed the shape of her voice when she laughed quietly, as if amused by something only she understood. Others noticed, not her beauty alone, which was undeniable, but her gravity, the way she made things quieter around her without silence becoming absence. And Orpheus, the great musician, the man whose name was carried on winds and echoed in the halls of kings, no longer wandered. He remained. When he played in the village square, she sat at the edge. Never beside him, never too far, just within reach of the melody. His music had changed. The elders remarked on it. Not louder, not softer, but fuller. The kind of fullness that made even sadness sound like warmth. Their love was not a tale told in wine halls. It was not sung by bards or painted on vases. It was not a story. It was a condition, a rhythm that others felt in the shift of Orpheus's gait, in the way Eurydice touched a leaf before she picked it, as though asking the tree's permission. When he asked her to marry him, there were no witnesses, just a question that barely needed answering. She nodded, smiling. He did not kneel. The wind was too strong that day, but he held her hand, and she squeezed once, and it was done. The wedding was quiet. The gods were invited, as is custom, but none were expected. Even Orpheus, for all his music, did not imagine divine guests. The villagers brought bread, grapes, figs. Women hung branches of myrtle over the tables. A dog barked somewhere near the river. Children ran barefoot, tossing petals they'd stolen from garlands meant for the altar. Eurydice wore white linen wrapped in loops around her shoulders. Orpheus did not wear a crown. His hair was windblown, his fingers smudged with earth from setting stones into place that morning. They stood beneath a single olive tree, and the priest blessed them without flourish. There was music, of course, but it was not Orpheus's music. Others played, clumsy and joyful. He sat beside her, his lyre across his knees, unplayed. She leaned against his shoulder. He watched her watch the dancers, the way she laughed without sound, the way her eyes softened whenever the fire caught the gold in the air. And he thought, "This is enough. This is the song I was born to play." They danced once, slowly, not in the center, on the edge. The stars came out, and the music drifted, and for a time, small, immeasurable, perfect, nothing moved except them. That night, as they lay beneath open sky, her hand resting over his chest, he did not sleep. He watched her breathing, the curve of her mouth, the shape of her dreams across her brow. The world had never seemed so complete, not in grandeur, not in ambition, but in stillness, in the soft cadence of two hearts moving in time. No omens came, no warnings. The stars held their peace, and morning arrived like always, gently, without suspicion. She did not cry out. There was no warning, no scream, no frantic reaching for help. Just a breath, caught too quickly, and a step into tall grass that shivered for a moment, then stilled. The sun was soft that morning. The fields glowed gold, and the wind stirred only slightly. Eurydice had wandered ahead, not far, just far enough to brush her hand along the tops of the flowers. She moved like she always did, lightly, as though she belonged more to the breeze than to the earth beneath her. Then came the serpent. Its fangs found her ankle, swift and final. A single strike, and then it vanished into the green. She took one step more, then folded to the ground like the closing of a song. Later, they would say she smiled at the end, that she saw something before the world dimmed, that she whispered his name once. But the stories disagree. What is certain is this: she died alone, surrounded by light, the sky too blue to carry grief. The fields fell silent. Somewhere far away, someone laughed, unaware. The world did not stop. And yet, something shifted. A line erased. A balance undone. Her absence rang louder than her voice ever had. The news traveled quickly. She had only just become a bride. The wreath still hung above their doorway. The wedding cloths lay folded, not yet packed away. Orpheus was found kneeling in the dust beside the altar, the strings of his lyre limp, the bow clutched in a hand that would not let go. He said nothing. No tears, no curses, just silence. They buried her by the river, the same river where they had met. A small grave, lined with stones. Flowers placed gently, not as tribute, but in apology. The priest offered words, but they floated into the air and did not settle. Nothing settled. Everything remained floating, breathless, weightless. The villagers lingered, watching Orpheus, waiting for the song, the lament, the music that would break their hearts open. But he gave them nothing. Not then. He disappeared for days. Some say he walked upstream. Others say he sat at the base of a tree and did not move, the bark shaping to his spine. When he returned, the lyre was strung again, but he did not play it, not yet. The world, once softened by his presence, now grew hesitant. The birds sang less in the groves he walked. Animals watched from further away. Even the leaves, when stirred by wind, made more cautious sounds. There was no wrath in him, only withdrawal, as though each step he took pulled him further not just from others, but from the realm of the living. In dreams, she came to him, not speaking, just standing near. Her eyes were calm but distant. He would reach for her and wake with fingers outstretched toward an empty room. The dreams did not torment him. They only reminded him how close she had been, how near she still was, just beyond the skin of the world. And then, one morning, he rose with certainty. He did not announce it. He did not seek blessing. He took his lyre, wrapped it in cloth, and began to walk. South, toward the edge of what was known. Toward the hills where travelers went only when they were ready to return changed, or not return at all. He passed shepherds and stonemasons who stopped their work to watch him go. No one spoke. Children followed him to the edge of the village, then lingered, unwilling to cross the place where shadow began. At the river's edge, he paused. The same current that had once carried her laugh now moved past him in near silence. He stepped into it, walked through it, and emerged on the far side, water clinging to his legs like memory. The land beyond was quieter, not dead, but waiting. He followed paths that no longer appeared on maps, animal tracks that twisted in impossible ways, trees that leaned in toward one another as if whispering. The soil darkened, the air thickened, and he did not stop. They say that to enter the land of the dead is to forget. But Orpheus remembered everything, every syllable of her voice, the shape of her hand in his, the way she tilted her head when listening. These memories burned inside him, sharper than fire, clearer than light. He carried them like armor, like torches, and in that way, he crossed the boundary. Not with ritual, not with spell, just with love, just with loss, just with the unbearable silence that followed her absence. And the dead, recognizing something of themselves in him, made way. There was no gate, no marker, no chiseled line in the rock that said, "Here ends the land of the living." The path simply changed. The wind no longer brushed the trees. The light no longer cast shadows. The world began to feel like it was waiting for something that would not arrive. And still Orpheus walked, his lyre slung across his back, silent but present, the strings barely stirring with the movement of his breath. He had passed out of the world of the sun and into the borderland, where the dead listened more than the living spoke. At first, there were echoes, not voices, just the soft repetition of sounds that did not originate. His footsteps rang once, then again from a place where there was no stone. His heartbeat pulsed, and the rhythm returned from behind him, though he walked alone. Trees bent away from the path. The moss beneath his feet felt warm, as if recently touched by others. But he saw no one. The land opened into a hollow, deep and wide, where the earth seemed to remember its own burial. Mists curled upward from cracks in the stone. Insects moved without sound. Orpheus stepped lightly, as though each footprint risked waking something. Still, he moved forward, down through places where the ground sloped without shape, into folds of rock that led nowhere but down. He did not speak. He did not hum. But the lyre began to vibrate softly at his side, not from his touch, but from the nearness of shadow. The strings sensed the threshold before he did. When the mist thickened into fog and the cold began to settle into his teeth, he knew. He had crossed into Hades. There were no walls, no fortresses, just vastness, dark and low and deep, as if the world had hollowed itself out and left only space. Here, the dead did not drift like spirits from mortal tales. They were shapes without edges, presences. Their sorrow was not loud. It was waiting for something to break the silence. He walked among them, and they watched him, not with malice, not with hunger, with curiosity. A living man, yes, but carrying a grief that mirrored their own. Some reached toward him, but their hands dissolved into air. Others followed without sound. He passed through a corridor of memories, and none stopped him. Then the darkness thickened, became river, black water, moving without ripples. The Styx, its surface reflected nothing, and still it flowed. A figure stood at its edge, tall and still, with eyes like broken coins. Charon did not speak. His boat was already waiting, carved from wood older than time, resting just above the waterline. Orpheus stepped in. No fare was asked. No oar was dipped. The boat moved, as though drawn by intention alone. Charon stood silent at the helm, and Orpheus closed his eyes. He felt the cold seep into his chest. He remembered her lips, how they warmed when she smiled, and for a moment the chill receded. They crossed in silence. When they arrived, the boat did not stop. It simply ceased to exist, dissolving into the mist as if it had never been carved. Orpheus stood again on stone, hard, smooth, aching with weight. Before him stretched the plain of Asphodel, vast and pale and restless. The spirits here whispered like wind through wheat, millions of murmurs, each one too quiet to grasp. Orpheus stepped forward, and the whispers stopped. A path opened not by force, but by reverence. The dead made way, remembering. And then came Cerberus. The guardian of the threshold, the beast of 3 heads and black eyes like coals left too long in the fire. Its body was the shape of nightmare, muscle layered on shadow, teeth like broken ivory, breath that reeked of endings. It stood between the world and its ruler. It did not growl. It did not leap. It simply watched. Orpheus did not reach for his lyre. Not yet. He stepped forward once. The middle head shifted. The left ear twitched. Still no sound. Then, softly, he strummed a single note. The vibration carried. Not loud, not sudden, but clear. The kind of note that comes before memory. The beast froze. Its breath slowed. One head closed its eyes. Another chord. Then another. A melody barely there. A lullaby not written, but remembered by something deeper than mind. Cerberus lowered itself, the ground trembling beneath its weight. And then, without a word, it lay down. Orpheus passed. The gates of Hades stood beyond. Not iron, not stone, just absence. The kind of absence that demands notice. He stepped through it. The air changed. Denser, thicker, alive with judgment. Now, the throne room. And the gods who ruled beneath the earth. Hades, Persephone, death and return. End and renewal. They waited in silence. And Orpheus raised his lyre. He stood before them without bowing, not from pride, not from arrogance, but because to move too quickly was to shatter the silence that held the room like frost. Hades watched from his throne, still as black marble, his gaze distant yet absolute. Beside him, Persephone sat draped in the softness of spring remembered, though no bloom grew here. Her eyes found Orpheus and did not leave him. Around them stretched the court of the dead, ranks of souls that did not shift or stir. The air was still, not breathless, but waiting. Orpheus did not speak. There were no words to carry what he brought. He reached behind his shoulder and brought the lyre forward, its polished surface dulled slightly from the dust of his descent. His fingers hovered over the strings like someone about to speak to an old friend, unsure if they would be recognized. He did not ask permission. He simply began. The first note was quiet, not weak, intentional. A single sound laid into the air like a drop into still water. It rang without echo, without return, but it remained. His fingers moved again, a phrase this time, unfinished, then another, and another, stitched together with breath and silence. The music did not bloom. It unfolded like petals learning the shape of the sun again. He played of the moment before meeting her, when he still believed the world was complete. He played the space she filled before he knew it was empty. He played of her laughter not in melody, but in rhythm, the cadence of a joy that arrived softly and lingered long after its cause had gone. The music drifted outward, not far, just enough to find the corners of the throne room and settle there like fog. The shades in the court began to shift, not visibly, not with movement, but with weight. The attention in the room sharpened, not just listening, remembering. They felt it, the ache of something once held and long lost. Persephone leaned forward. It was not much. A tilt of her head, the faint motion of a hand resting more deliberately upon her lap. But the air noticed. Hades did not move, but his grip upon the arm of the throne loosened. He blinked. Once. Orpheus continued. Now came the wedding. No grand procession, no gold, no gods descending from clouds. Just the simplicity of two hands held beneath an olive tree, a promise made not in thunder, but in breath. He played the dust on her sandals, the shape of her smile when she thought no one was watching, the moment they danced once, slowly, with no audience. The notes grew fuller, not louder, just closer. They leaned into the world. One of the judges of the dead, faceless and unmoved for centuries, bowed its head. The Furies, coiled and silent, felt their whips slacken. Even Cerberus, far beyond the chamber, shifted where it lay. And then the music changed. It narrowed, darkened. The strings trembled with what they carried. He played the grass, the serpent, the moment when joy turned. The air left her lungs, the stillness that followed. He played how the wind did not cry out, how the sun did not dim, how the world continued without her, unbothered by its own cruelty. And finally, he played the silence, the one that came after, the kind that folds itself into the edges of a room, the kind that never leaves, but waits. When he stopped, there was no applause. There was no sound at all. The silence had changed. It was no longer cold. It was listening. He lowered the lyre. Persephone looked at Hades. Nothing passed between them. No signal, no whispered bargain. Just understanding. The kind shared by those who have lived with grief long enough to know its weight. Hades turned toward Orpheus. His voice was low and level, not thunder, not command, just stone finally choosing to speak. "She may follow you," he said, "but only if you do not look back." No embellishment, no ceremony, a condition laid like stone across a river, unmovable. You will walk ahead, she will follow, and if you turn, even once, she will be lost to you forever." Orpheus did not nod. He did not cry. He only stepped back, turned, and began to walk. Behind him, something stirred. No footfall, no whisper, but a warmth that had not touched his skin since the day she died. Eurydice was rising from the shadows, not with joy, not with fear, with stillness, the kind that walks only when called by love. They began their ascent, two souls, one with eyes open, the other unseen, but present. They walked in silence, not from caution, not from fear, but because silence was the condition. It stretched between them like a thread drawn tight, unbroken. Orpheus could not see her. He dared not try. But he felt her, just beyond the reach of sound, just behind the echo of his steps. Her presence was no longer dream or memory. It was real, humming like a second heartbeat beneath the surface of the air. The path from the underworld did not rise in straight lines. It curved, shifted, narrowed. Sometimes it opened into vast chambers where shadows leaned in close. Sometimes it funneled through tight corridors where the walls seemed to breathe. The stones beneath his feet grew warmer. Somewhere far above, the world of the living waited. He counted the rhythm of her pace. She stepped when he stepped, paused when he paused. He imagined her hands at her sides, steady, her eyes fixed on the floor, her mouth set in the quiet determination he remembered so well. But he could not look. The gods had been clear. At times he heard things, voices he did not recognize, a child laughing, a whisper from the side of the path, a sob held in a stranger's throat. The underworld was not empty. It pressed close, curious, watching. It did not resist his journey, but it did not make it easy. It did not tempt. It reminded. The silence weighed heavier the higher they climbed. The stillness behind him was not absence. It was presence, stretched thin and fragile. He longed to ask if she was all right, to hear her breath or the brush of her fingers on the stone wall. But the law was clear. One word, one glance, one moment of doubt would take her away. He passed a corridor lined with carvings, stories of others who had walked this path. Some succeeded, some turned too soon. The stone figures did not move, but Orpheus felt their gaze. They watched him not as judges, but as witnesses. Their silence was not empty. It was memory. The air was dry now. The damp weight of the lower world had lifted. His boots no longer sank into moss-dark soil. They struck stone, and the sound echoed ahead instead of behind. The tunnel grew narrower and lighter. A breeze passed across his cheek like a question. The climb steepened. With each step, the passage grew brighter, not with firelight, but with the promise of morning. He saw the faint outline of tree roots curling along the ceiling, the suggestion of earth near the surface. The world above was no longer myth. It was near, close enough to reach, close enough to doubt. Behind him, her footsteps faltered, just once. A small pause. His heart leapt. He stopped walking, breath held, listening. One heartbeat. Two. Then another step. She was still there. He moved on. He thought of turning, not in defiance, not even in fear, just to know, to see her one more time, to catch her eyes and know with certainty that she was truly there, that she had followed him, that they had done the impossible. But the gods had made no room for certainty, only trust. He remembered how she once walked beside him in fields of tall grass, her dress brushing the stems, her fingers grazing his. He remembered her humming without realizing it, a quiet tune that had no beginning or end. He tried to hold on to that sound now, tried to let it fill the silence, but the silence remained. The tunnel turned sharply, and a crack of daylight appeared ahead, pale and gray, but real. The surface, the wind. He kept walking. What if she stumbled now? What if she lost her way in the final steps? What if the path grew too steep, too narrow? What if the bargain was never real? And still, she did not speak. She did not reach for him. The last stretch of tunnel was rough and uneven. Roots hung low, tangled like hair across the ceiling. His shoulders brushed the walls. The light grew stronger with every step, and so did the ache in his chest. He emerged into it. Daylight touched his skin. The air smelled of damp stone and living trees. The sky above was wide and silent, and for a moment he stood still. He had done it. But behind him there was no footfall, just a pause, just the silence that had walked with him from the start. And suddenly, silence was not enough. There was no sound when it happened. No scream, no gasp, no break in the rhythm of the air. Only the faint crunch of his footstep on gravel and the unbearable stillness that followed. Orpheus had reached the edge of the light. The tunnel behind him remained wrapped in dimness, just shy of dawn, just outside the reach of certainty. He stood in the world of the living, breath shallow, heart stilled, and felt nothing. He turned. There are moments that stretch longer than time, that unfold not with speed, but with silence. When his head moved, it moved slowly, not out of hesitation, but reverence, as if even in the breaking of the rule he hoped for gentleness, as if some part of him still believed the gods might grant mercy just once. She stood in the shadows behind him, exactly as he remembered. Her dress was the color of wild earth, her eyes wide, not in surprise, but in sorrow. She had followed him the whole way. Her steps had matched his, her silence had kept the vow. She had trusted him, and he had turned too soon. Their eyes met, not for long, but long enough to hold everything: grief, apology, recognition, and a love too large for language. She did not raise her hands. She did not cry out. She did not curse him. She simply began to fade, not all at once. The way dreams do when waking comes slowly. The edges of her outline shimmered, then softened. The color drained from her skin. Her hair lifted faintly, as though caught in a current he could not feel. Her mouth parted, not to speak, but to breathe one last time. Orpheus reached for her. Reflex, not reason. But his fingers found only light. Her hand dissolved before it met his. Her outline flickered. Her eyes closed, not from fear, but resignation. And then she was gone. No thunder cracked. No voice from the sky declared the sentence. The punishment had been built into the law itself. One look, one moment, one choice. And now, nothing. Orpheus stood at the threshold, arm outstretched into emptiness. The tunnel behind him echoed with absence. The stillness rushed back in like water, filling the space she had left. The only movement was the wind, brushing leaves that had no witness. He did not scream. The grief was too sudden for sound. He sank to his knees, slowly, like a man lowering himself into water. His hands fell open. The lyre still hung from his back, untouched. It had brought him this far, but it could not bring her back. He sat there as the sun climbed, as the shadows shifted, as the forest awakened around him. Birds moved in the trees, cautious at first, then freely. The air smelled of moss, of distant rain, of life. But none of it reached him. He did not move, not because he hoped to reverse it, but because motion would acknowledge what had happened. Stillness was the only defense he had left. The forest watched him. Animals passed without fear. Insects circled without landing. The world made space for him, as if it too understood the shape of sorrow he carried. Time passed, but it did not matter. He was no longer measuring it in hours or days, only in the weight of what was lost. Eventually, he stood. He did not look back at the tunnel. He did not call her name. He began to walk, slowly, with the measured steps of someone carrying something fragile inside them. The lyre shifted on his back with each movement, but he did not reach for it. Not yet. He passed into the trees, down the slope, across the stones that marked the edge of the underworld's domain. The world did not stop for him, but it softened slightly. Some say the gods watched. That Hades and Persephone, seated once again in their silent throne room, said nothing. Not from cruelty, but because they had no words for this part of the story. Others say that Eurydice, returned to shadow, did not cry. That she waited as she had before, quietly, gently, knowing that love, even when severed, still echoes. And Orpheus walked, not toward purpose, not toward redemption, only forward, because to stay still was to break. He would sing again, one day, not today, but the song was already forming, not of hope, not yet, but of memory, of silence, of a name spoken only once in the dark. The world moved on around him. Seasons shifted with the steady patience of time, indifferent and unconcerned. Leaves budded, ripened, fell, and budded again. Cities rose where fields had once stretched empty. Temples crumbled into dust, and the names of kings faded like mist from marble. But Orpheus no longer moved within that rhythm. He wandered through it like a ghost in his own story, untouched, untouching. The lyre never left his back. It hung there like a memory he couldn't part with, its strings weathered by dew and silence, its music carried only in the hollows of his ribs. He walked along river banks where no one waited. He crossed meadows stitched with light, sat beneath trees whose roots curled around bones no one remembered. He did not ask for shelter. He did not speak of Eurydice. But those who met him, briefly, unexpectedly, never forgot the look in his eyes, as if he still stood halfway between life and death, waiting for a door that would never open again. He played, not for others, not for reward, but because the world was quieter when his fingers were moving. He played for the dusk, for the weight of twilight as it settled on the shoulders of hills. He played for the reeds that trembled when no wind passed. His music no longer sang of triumph or beauty. It whispered of waiting. It lingered in the stillness between questions, in the echo of a name not spoken aloud. He played what remained when love has nowhere to go. People followed him sometimes, not for long. They could not stay in his silence. They said his songs made the air thinner, the sky larger, their hearts too tender. They wept without knowing why. They forgot their own names for a while, remembered someone else's. He left them changed, not healed, but softened, as if grief had walked beside them for a time and reminded them of its quiet, endless shape. He never returned to the cities. He did not climb the temple steps. The gods had no more to offer. Their thrones were too loud, their gifts too brittle. He wanted none of it. The only altar he approached was the sky, and even that he spoke to sparingly. The earth grew older. Empires bent, cracked, reformed. But Orpheus did not. He wore no crown. He answered no summons. He walked. And the forest, the river, the stars, they made space for him. Some say he died violently. that strangers, drunken, jealous, godless, tore him apart beside a river, that his head floated down the stream still singing, his tongue remembering the shape of her name even as the water closed over his lips. Others reject this. They say he lay beneath an olive tree one dusk and never rose again, that the wind took his last breath like it was something sacred, that the lyre fell silent not with pain, but with the long sigh of something completed. But those who know, those who truly listen, know that he did not disappear. When he died, something shifted. The air in the underworld grew softer. The walls cracked slightly, not with ruin, but with welcome. Shadows that had known only silence felt the tremor of a chord returning. Eurydice, long since absorbed into stillness, stirred. She did not rise like before. She did not walk toward the exit. But her posture changed. Her hands, once folded in the stillness of the dead, lifted slightly. Her breath, which had been the breath of memory alone, deepened. She felt something familiar moving toward her, not as sound, but as presence. Orpheus arrived not with torch or crown, not with plea or song. He came barefoot, quiet as dust, clothed in the long ache of a life that had waited. He did not look for her. He knew where she stood. And when their eyes met again, it was not as lovers torn by fate. It was as two voices that had always been part of the same song, returning to their harmony. They did not embrace. They did not speak. Their silence now was not absence. It was everything. A silence filled with every note that had ever been played for her. Every glance never returned. Every breath held too long. They turned together, not to climb, not to escape, but to walk deeper, into the shade beyond endings, into the stillness that was not cold, but whole. They did not vanish. They dissolved into myth, into music, into the quiet things that linger after the story has been told. Some say they are still there, walking, that when wind moves through the trees and does not bend the branches, it is them. That when fire crackles with no one tending it, it listens for their footsteps. That the hush before a melody begins is their breath filling the room. And in the sky, his lyre shines, not as monument, but as promise, as reminder, that some silences are not empty, and some love stories never end.